Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, and my books you can find on Amazon, published by Triumph Press, Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, and Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. Feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I have three guests on. I have Kelly Patton. She was last on the podcast, season 4, episode 124, 146, 151, and season 5, episode 53 and 193. I also have Marnay on. She was last on season 5, episode 93, and Tracy Lynn. We're going to talk about a hearing that was held on May 22nd on the funding of foster children and adoption incentives. Now, if you know anyone who has had children removed by CPS or wrongfully drugged with psychotropic medication while in foster care, they are getting letters. And we're going to show where it should be and how it should be submitted. And they have to have these letters in by May 31st. And I've got a header here that everyone can see here. Essentially, it says hearing date May 22nd, 24, your name, your address, your email here, Senate Committee on Finance, attention, editorial and document section RMSD-219, Dirksen Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C., 20510-6200. I welcome you, Kelly, Beatrice, and Tracy. Tell us more.
I'll start if no one wants to.
Okay, yes.
Please, yeah.
Okay, so my name is Beatrice. I'm a federal lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Kelly and I meet continuously with Congress on this very issue. We've been doing this since 2020. And we know that the migrant children always get the attention of what is going wrong and needing to be fixed, especially with the APA, the American Psychological Association, where they say tearing families apart is a really catastrophic emotional trauma that can never be repaired. But yet they won't say that about the children in family court and the children being removed with CPS. Now, these children their physiology isn't different than a migrant child. Their brain is exactly wired the same. They love their parents. They don't want to leave home. They don't want to leave their dogs. They don't want to leave their friends. They don't want to leave their schools, but they have to in times of these removals that are so frivolous, for broken windows, for one spanking, and when you start reading these cases that this is all fraud. This is all they're exploiting children to gain federal funding. And they don't just gain the federal funding on the Title 4E and the Title 4D, which is child support and the placing of children. They go behind their backs, their lawyers' back, their foster parents' backs, and they take survival benefits. They take Social Security disability benefits. They will squeeze out as much as they can from any child. And there's a company in Texas called Justice Inc., who, if you give them a name and a social, they will tell you exactly what you can squeeze out of that child for federal funding. And to top it off, there's another scheme where they won't place them, and they say there's not enough houses, and they keep them in hotels or office floors to make the general public feel that there is such a need to just do anything they can to get them somewhere, that they then start funneling more money into these hotel stays, which is about social workers in Maryland have showed me their reports where it's 30 to 60,000 per child, per hotel room, per month. With that kind of money, you can buy them a house, their entire family, and
Wow.
repatriation. And so it's not renting and in poverty, generation after generation, which is, the main reason for removal. It's not really abuse. They find vulnerable people in poverty, which there is a bill that basically states recently in Congress that children should not be removed for poverty
Right.
reasons, because they're calling that neglect. And there's a few people that are very advocating for that bill. And basically, they know that the federal funding is incentivizing the removal of these children, whatever they have to do, whatever crimes they have to do to get these children removed. It's basically weaponizing just another government agency to harm and break up families, so that the nuclear family doesn't exist and chaos does.
Yeah. They create that, and they also invade the home, and they want the parents to immediately get a divorce.
And not only that, they will convince the child that their parents, aren't healthy enough to raise them. Yet you look at the statistics in foster care, and it is atrocity after atrocity. Immediately they're, given the psychotropic medicine and combinations that are very dangerous to them, to their brains. And at one point, Kelly and I were conspiracy theorists, but now with the congressional report that came out, Senator Ossoff named 5 states where this is a pattern of practice. There's no protocol in removing met. There's no protocol in drugging these children with psychotropic medicines met. So therefore, they are intentionally creating a bigger problem than the problem they are claiming and frauding that they're trying to fix.
Right. And they're also not only just giving them medications and more medical diagnoses that they didn't have, they're now transferring out of states to do transgender surgery on any of them. It's crazy. We're finding it over and over. So now you got the drugs, now you got the surgeries and the new medical diagnosis, and they didn't go into foster care. And when they come out of foster care, over half of them that never had diagnoses now have medical diagnosis. It's crazy. And then every diagnosis, they get more money.
Right. Foster care parents make more money if the child is now autistic and then was not autistic before they came in. And maybe they're getting away with this because they're saying, well, they were neglected, so no one can diagnose them. But there's a history of a good parent taking that child, to the doctor for a simple little wart or a simple little, some kind of bullying at school. So, that parent was effectively taking that child to their providers, talking to the school about, hey, how do we make this grade better? So at that point, any of these issues could have been assessed. And yet somehow the most incompetent agency, and how do we know they're incompetent? Congress tells us they're incompetent.
Yeah.
They're not meeting protocol, but they need more funding, right? They need more funding to be competent is what their remedy is. I am a firm believer that no more funding. It feeds this beast, this monster of a problem. So the funding is only going to remove more children, incentivize this exploitation, and it's harming. We always talk about the children. We never talk about what it's doing to the parents. It is literally creating brain injuries in parents. I know for a fact. It is creating, it is the cause of suicides. We don't even have the data on that because they don't want us to have the data on what's important. And honestly, because these parents know that these children are either going to end up in prison, in the morgue, or sex trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
And the statistics are very high for that.
Yes.
There's no other, I mean, seldomly do they end up in college and doing well. The majority, and it's at 80%, will end up
Mhm.
in those three, paths.
Yeah.
And if you're a good parent who took good care of your child, it absolutely kills you and tortures you to watch this agency get away with all their resources and all their power to
Mhm.
do this to your children. And Ossoff said they are abusing and neglecting children. So, and in a very extreme level, while they take them away from parents for very minor, I mean, they literally call everything neglect and abuse when a parent does it. That doesn't even fall in that category.
Right. And they're even, if you don't go with their pronouns and their political agenda, they're taking your children. Kelly had a case that they didn't have cabinet doors, where you have them designed where you want your plates and decorative to show. They took their children because they didn't have cabinet doors. It was designed that way. It's getting crazier and crazier.
The social worker ran out of reasons to remove children, I guess, in that case. I'm familiar with that case. Yeah. So came up with the cabinets, but we have windows broken. Yet they have a million to house that child,
Mm-hmm.
3 million to transgender that child,
Oh.
2 million to terminate the parental rights of that child, the parent in courts to pay for appointed attorneys and experts to take your children. But they don't have money to fix the windows so that they don't take the children.
Correct. Actually, I have a case here in Kansas that the court actually filed for a divorce for the parents to alienate the stepfather, so he was no longer a party to the case to get custody of the child. The actual court divorced them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I
they
want
want
to talk a little bit
Mm.
about the work that Kelly and I do in Congress.
Mhm.
We go to the Congress is made up of different committees. One is oversight,
Mhm.
and that we need, and one is ways and means. Of course, children and families, we need that committee. But oversight has lost their funding. So I know Senator Grassley is chair of that, I believe. I'm not sure, but he definitely has stated that Congress has removed their funding, so they can only have 5 people up there, 5 people getting paid to oversee federal funding. We're talking wars, child removals. I mean, you name it, welfare, medical, anything the federal government pays for. 5 people are actually investigating oversight on that. And then the oversight committee, they've taken away their funding to be able to do their job. So in reality, Congress is defunding oversight for a reason, because they know the states and the federal government know this is happening. The people that are the powerful people who are creating this are creating and making sure that the Congress members that are trying to get more oversight or trying to do their jobs cannot do their jobs.
Mhm.
And then there's Ways and Mean,
Mhm.
who, and like this letter that we are talking about, that's the Finance Committee. So the
Mhm.
Finance Committee had the meeting or the hearing recently, where the agency that we're complaining about showed up and said, everything's perfect. There's not many issues. We do not remove children unless we really, really have to. And then we use the money, if we have to remove them, to find them beautiful homes and get them adopted out. So they're portraying this wonderful situation. Therefore, it is so important that the header that you showed at the beginning, Marianne, that people get their header written exactly the way it is demonstrated. Send in a 10 under 10-page report, single spaced. Is the email on there? No. Okay. It's, does anyone remember the email? It's,
Yeah, I know it. Statements for the record altogether. Statements for the record at finance.senate.gov.
And I will put that in the podcast notes.
Thank you.
Right. And what they should be talking about is how the money used to help them thrive was not used to help them thrive. In fact, if their children were wrongfully removed or wrongfully drugged, or they were separated prematurely without court orders, that money was used to do the opposite, to take a thriving family and harm them and tear it apart, unnecessary to exploit them. And you don't need case records, case files. You don't need much. You just need to say you're part of the group of people that are being exploited for federal funding, and just talk about the atrocities you witness. If your children were drugged, if they were told to transgender, if they were removed prematurely for no reason.
If
So
you
just make sure.
if you repeated programs over and over, if you overdid drug testing, if you did drug testing and you were never positive for drugs, that's a waste of money. Many psychological evaluations, anything that was over the top that pertained to your situation is a waste of money.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Of taxpayer dollars.
Yes, absolutely.
And you really do need, as much as Kelly and I meet with Congress, they really don't write it down in the books until a constituent calls. Yes, they know there's a problem. When they sit at the meetings, they can handle the problems better because they hear our data, which the agencies that show up to get this funding forget to tell or cover it up. So, but you need to call each of your Congress members and explain this exact situation and send the same report or statement that you sent to the Finance Committee to your personal congressional members, so that they are aware that they are responsible for an area where they have constituents in this scheme.
Mm-hmm.
We stop their funding, then we have money to be able to investigate what needs to be investigated, because no funding, they have funding, they just got to put it to the children and that's it.
Right. Tracy's absolutely right. If we uncover this scheme and we start investigations, then if the wrongful removals stop and the drugging of children, that's a lot of trillions saved that can go into investigating these people and these schemes, because arrests do need to be made. Accountability needs to be pursued. We need to fight for that. Otherwise, this harm, inhumane acts on people will never end.
Also, with the Title 4D funding, when they take the child from the parents, then they make the parents pay child support to the foster parent. How do you stop that? Because that's $1 billion a year business.
That is a good question. We're not there yet. We're just trying to figure out how to stop CPS from going into Congress and saying everything's great, that they have no wrongful removals, that the funding's only used to give that child a better life and a happy family. We know that there is a huge problem with child support because it ties into the same scheme. Because once you remove a child and you have to pay for them to get placed, you obviously, the parent who lost that child now has to pay child support. we feel that once we unravel this onion and tear one little layer of exposing the wrongful removal, then of course, by default, the child support will be fraud as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. It's all fraud.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a huge problem. And the more people that speak about it, the more that something will be done. I mean, look at, nothing's been done in all this time when, you know, they've been taking children since the orphan trains. I know we've
Right.
talked about that. They take
Mhm.
migrant and forced orphans and children in poverty. They remove them from parents, tear them apart. I think 200,000 orphans in 1854 were transported from East Coast cities to the Midwest to labor traffic them. Who knows if sexual trafficking was happening? I'm sure, of course, it was. And 100,000 parents went into a mental institution after that, because you cannot just remove a child for no reason, expect a parent to be completely okay with that. Of course, they're going to have trauma. So they
Right.
use that trauma, initial trauma, to make you look like you need to be mentally institutionalized.
Mhm.
So that happened in 1854. Nothing's happened since. But what has changed since we have started lobbying and talking about this is congressional hearings have started happening. Better laws are passed. People are no longer afraid to talk very bluntly about this scheme. And that's what needs, if they're weaponizing our agencies against our families, we need to talk about it, talk about it, talk about it.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, we could put all the law on the books we want, but at this point, they're not even following the existing law or their own rules. They're just doing whatever they want. They went rogue, period.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Funded by Soros and funding the prosecutors who won't prosecute these crimes. So then of course the investigators and the local police are afraid to bring these crimes into existence, because if we have one hero in that police station, whoever is part of this scheme is definitely going to make sure that, you know, they either lose their job or get retaliated on.
Yep.
Because if you knew there was a prosecutor in your city that won't even look at these crimes, then why fight the whole department and bring them to existence? And then you contact the DOJ, which is not the right person to contact with this finance committee meeting. But when you do contact the DOJ and give them the cases, they will point blank say to you, well, it's not that we don't find credibility or we don't believe what you're saying. We just don't have the manpower to investigate. So you have the manpower to investigate Trump. But I mean, I'm not trying to get political. I did not vote for him. But you don't have the manpower to investigate where children are going when you know they were sex trafficked, or they're being sex trafficked, or drugged wrongfully and groomed for this kind of life. And not only that, but the media won't even cover this. There is every so often, there are mass graves found of children in South Texas. 2,000, there's always about 2,000 mass graves. We don't know what race they are. We don't know if there are organs in them. We contact medical investigators or medical examiners for the autopsy. They don't keep the data. It's all very convenient.
Even Ossoff's report mentions a quote by the National Missing and Exploited Children's Unit that this is a crisis. They quote crisis. Now we make a crisis out of everything and we react like it's a crisis, but now it's the children and they literally quote it's a crisis, and we're not responding like it's a crisis. It's a crisis.
Yeah.
Well, you even got the courthouses that have a sign telling your kids what location to go to with other street kids, get high and party and have oral sex for money, and they know where they're they're telling the kids where to go. This is in family court promoting their media to have your child be sex trafficked and party and get high, and they know where they're located and they're the ones sending them there. So we have a big issue here.
Just to collaborate with what Tracy's saying, there are news articles that say that biological parents, good parents that lost children for very frivolous reasons, children are, the ombudsman in Virginia will say the children are removed first day for basically no reason and never seen again. So biological parents do not have knowledge of their whereabouts, can't speak to them, can't find them, yet sex traffickers always find them. So there's definitely, and Congress has called it out, there's definitely a huge link to foster care and sex trafficking. There's been foster youth that say my foster parents left me in a park and watched people try to kidnap me. There's been there's current investigations right now in North Carolina where social workers left the child in a bathroom and left. The attendant called the police investigated. When they figured out that this child was intentionally left in the bathroom, the social workers said, well, the child ran off. When the police told the social worker, we have video that shows you left him, they're caught. And it doesn't take rocket science to figure out why they left him. Who was on the receiving end was late, obviously.
Then you have the schools, they have toddler beds in their administration bathroom. Does any of this even make sense? They're all involved. They're all grooming the children in school. And if you don't adhere to their guidelines, your child will be removed and you won't ever see them again. That's where we're at, and they don't just take your child or children, they take everything to try to shut you up. And then you got St. Francis Ministries and a lot of agencies saying they're closing, like they're looking like they're doing something. And instead they're using the same staff at the same location that says permanently closed under a different name. Kelly, would you like to speak on that since you have the details?
Apparently St. Francis Ministries is closing here in Sedgwick County, and I believe they're reopening under a different name and a different location, and potentially maybe the same staff is just transferring over under a different name. So the cycle just keeps being perpetuated, just a different name.
Right. They did that with the hotel scheme too. They were caught handing out migrant hotel rooms, 2.1 billion, the foster kid hotel rooms. They were caught. I believe it was Senator Johnson, and I forgot what other senator or rep, I forgot who, Rep Johnson, I think. And they sent them, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Homeland Security, a letter saying you cannot do any more contracting with Endeavors, a company out of Texas, for this hotel voucher situation. We've given 2.1 billion. This is fraud. Nothing's coming out of it. They had a no contract, so that means no one else could bid for this job. They stopped working with them. Later on, the person who was in charge of this and Endeavor said, it's okay, we just opened in a different name, running the same business. So they will find a way to continuously keep frauding for this federal funding.
Because
they're not even
so much
using
money.
they are using aliases.
Right. Yeah. They'll definitely change names. Whoever they're working with will find them to keep funneling the money to them, even if they have to change different names, different locations. It's always the same players.
I also heard something disturbing where they're taking these kids from parents and they're placing them with the Amish, so the bloodline will be replenished. I had heard that recently. Because
Replenished in what sense?
well, they will use these kids, well, for labor, and then,
Oh, yeah.
forcing them into marriage at the age of 17 or 18 so they can procreate, and there will be a new bloodline that there won't be so much inbreeding.
Oh, okay. So you saw where Cynthia wrote us, said she was a federal employee whistleblower that worked in ORR, how she said that they were telling her, give the children to the traffickers because traffickers will not sue us. We cannot leave them in care for too long, is basically what they were telling her when she was like giving children to known traffickers. We can't do that. And, she got retaliated on. Well, maybe they're thinking, I don't know, because I don't know anything about the Amish, but maybe they're thinking, now we've been exposed, let's stop giving them to the traffickers and start giving them to the Amish, because I mean, honestly, they're trying to go the extreme level of correcting this nonsense.
Right. I mean, that does make sense.
But they do some outlandish stuff. When we finally get to the bottom of it, I'm always scratching my head. I'm more puzzled each and every day I work on this.
Each and every case that I look at gets worse and worse and worse. This never affected me mentally in any way. I never had nightmares. I could just do my job and then let it go, but it's getting worse and worse. Now it's kind of encroaching in my dreams at night. It's starting to, I've been doing this since 2015. So, I feel like from what I'm seeing, it is literally getting more, the removals are getting more and more ridiculous. They're happening longer. Then the judges are saying, well, now we're going to adopt your child out because this child's been in foster care for so long, when in reality, the parent had done everything with the program and this child should have been returned literally years ago. And now they're being adopted out because the judge says that now they've been alienated from the family, so they're just going to adopt them out. So yeah, it's getting worse and worse over the years I've been doing this, for sure.
Right. That's exactly what's been going on, and it has been spiraling downward. And, the public does not know about this. The taxpayer does not know.
No. Hopefully we'll get not only victims, but taxpayers to send this in by deadline, because they are affected if it's their money going into this scheme.
Yeah, they need to know. And, how can you all be reached? Is there any last words you would like to say?
Yes. So I'm Beatrice Marnay, Marna, on LinkedIn. Please send me your stories. We're doing national fundraisers, wine tasting, and selling wine bottles coming soon. We definitely just follow my LinkedIn to be able to understand how you can help or participate. But we definitely need to raise money for awareness and investigations.
We do have an email
And
address.
any taxpayer.
Right. So
Yes.
we do email that we made just for these investigations. It's justiceforchildrenalliance@gmail.com.
Okay, I'll put that in the podcast notes.
And also
Thank you.
taxpayers, if you could get, if you're a victim, if you can get about 10 taxpayers that that understand your case to send in letters with you, because the more that they find that constituents and people in the country do not want to pay for this scheme, the better it will be to end this scheme.
Exactly.
So don't just send
Yes.
your letter. Even if it's just one page, have someone else send it as well. And it's just an email. You don't have to certify mail it. You just email it. Very simple.
Okay, because I thought some people were also
work, but
I thought some people were having them notarized and mailed in certified to make sure they got the letter.
it's
Yeah.
not necessary. When
Okay.
they give you an email, what's necessary though is that you gather 10 different people, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, your neighbor, your best friends, your support group, your therapist, just anyone who really feels that this is wrong and
Mhm.
wants to do something about it. You always get those people like, what can I do? This is what you can do.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad you all came on to share this and expose this. And, Kelly, how can you be reached?
The same email that Tracy just gave. That's
Okay. Okay, I will do that. And also they can come through to me too, dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com as
thanks.
well. And so, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Join us again here in the future with Beatrice Marnay, Kelly, Patton, and Tracy. So you can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, Anchor FM, other platforms I don't know about, and feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you all.
Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne.
And we